Good morning, GeekSprech. My name is Alex, and this is episode 37. And with me, I got, as always, Eric. How are you, Eric?
I'm super fine. We are at Ignite in Orlando.
Again, we're back.
It's warm outside, yeah. To be honest, we had a while. The last episode was on Christmas.
Yeah, we were quite busy.
Yeah, quite busy year with all the announcements and all the news that happened. But now we are back. We have a full week, 4 GeekSprech episodes. And
Exciting!
Yay! And today we're talking about Azure Management, and for sure we have some super cool guests here. With us is Laura from the Microsoft Azure Management team, and we have also Alex. Please introduce yourself, guys.
Go for it.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for having me. My name is Laura Hunter. I was actually on GeekSprech last year.
Yes.
Also talking about Azure Management, still fighting the good Azure Management fight. I am part of the customer experience team inside of Azure, which means that I get to go out and talk to customers about, hey, these things that we're building, do they work? Are they actually letting you run your business better? And if you say yes, my job is very easy. And if you say no, I come back to people like Alex with my laundry list of things we need to go do, and hopefully he listens to me.
She's very persistent about that.
I can imagine.
Exactly. And so I'm here this week. I'm on the Azure Governance booth with Alex is here with me. I also have a couple of sessions in the Diversity and Tech track.
Nice.
So that's going to be a lot of fun. If you happen to be with us in Orlando this week, you should come and check them out.
For sure, you should. Alex, what about you?
So my name's Alex Frankel. Thanks again for having me here. It's really awesome to be here.
Pleasure.
I'm a program manager on actually the recently formed Azure deployments team. So I cover Azure blueprints and ARM template deployments in general, but as you can imagine, there's a ton of crossover with governance, which was the team I was on this time last year. So there's a lot of sort of work that we do together on that space.
Nice.
Okay, nice. And I think there we are right in the middle of the topic. Governance, that's waving around. I had a walk across the expo, and there are a lot of companies covering this topic, and every time you speak to a customer, even they failed or they don't don't trust to start because they have some issues with it.
Or they don't have any.
Or they don't have any.
Or it's the Wild Wild West, as we would say in the US. Yes.
Yeah, so what is it about governance? What does it mean, and what is it for, and why is Microsoft taking care of it?
Sure. So the way that we approach governance, kind of as at a high level, is back in the on-prem days, and that's not too long ago for many people. Many people, they're still in the on-prem days. There was the traditional management model was IT as the gatekeeper. If you needed a new server, you went to IT. If you had a server and you needed to expand capacity on it, you went to IT. If you needed configurations changed, you went to IT. You're sensing a theme. When we started looking at how especially large companies were approaching cloud adoption, what we wanted to do was to provide a way for security and compliance and all of the things that are very necessary to be able to run your companies. We wanted to be able to allow those to continue to work and function effectively, but at the same time, we wanted your infrastructure teams, your development teams, to be able to take advantage of the reasons you adopted the cloud in the first place. We want you to be able to take advantage of speed and scale and quick scale up and scale out, and being able to take advantage of new services as Alex throws them up into the portal. And so the way that we think about governance is really as a set of kind of guardrails. And I'll give you a really quick just example of it, just to really bring it into focus. Let's say you have an Azure subscription that you have set up for one of your testers, and they want to start testing some new service that's sitting up in Azure. As it turns out, the cloud costs money.
Oh, really?
And so you want your testers to be able to go and test things out, but you don't want to get to the end of the month and find that you've got a $20,000 US Azure bill.
Yeah.
Kind of not good. And so what you can do is you can set up an Azure policy that will specify you can do anything you want inside of the subscription as long as you are only deploying Series A and Series B VMs. No beasts for you. They cost too much money.
Yeah.
And you can then hand that subscription to your infrastructure teams, to your developers. You can make them owners of the subscription. They have full rights to that subscription. And as long as they're staying within that boundary that you've defined, they don't even know that IT was there.
Yeah,
Like they can create VMs through the portal, through PowerShell, through Azure CLI. They don't even know that they're there. They just get the full Azure experience. The moment they try to, whether out of intent or just not knowing any better, if they try to do something that's outside of those bounds that you've defined, it's only at that point that the policy services will kick in and will throw back a nice little...
They will recognize it.
They will recognize it. They will look at it at point of request, and they will say, they're asking for a beast. Yeah, no, I can't give them that. And we will give them back a nice error message to the effect of, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that.
Yeah, that's nice. I'm always referencing to it like the game rules for any game you have.
Right.
So you cannot start playing cards without knowing how. So
Right.
that's mainly the thing about the governance part.
Yep, exactly.
I would say. Is there anything special to wait for this week? I think we have a lot of announcements up front. I think your team did a lot of work the last months, weeks, and so on.
We were all holding our breath during Satya's keynote. It's always fun when you're in the keynote. So we've got a number of sessions this week. Alex can give you the kind of the high notes of which ones are the really fun ones. We are very early in the week, so I don't want to steal the thunder from any of my colleagues. But we do have some things that are going to be coming this week. Some announcements to look at around Azure policy and around our deployment services. But if you watch the recording of Satya's keynote this morning, you saw this really cool end-to-end story of Azure Arc, which, if you're unfamiliar with Azure Arc as a name, it's basically our hybrid Kubernetes effort. And so you will see this really cool demo around, here's this really cool stuff that you can do with Kubernetes going cross-prem, cross-cloud, and here's how you can use Azure Policy to ensure that this super cool deployment technology is not only easy, but is also kept secure and governed and well managed and all the good things.
Yeah, I think this was one of the super big announcements this morning. So if you've not watched the live keynote, so do the recording, then you see it. And I think during the week we get some deep dives into this topic. So Azure Arc is one of the BAM things, going multi-cloud, going hybrid, going everything. And I think this brings us to an interesting question. So what's your opinion about this multi-cloud? Alex, what's your opinion? Multi-cloud, going multi-cloud, managing multi-cloud? What's your thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see often, so you'll see this statistic that 85% of companies or 95% of companies are multi-cloud. Often what we see is there's a primary and a secondary cloud. So you will see most organizations taking a priority on Azure or AWS or whatever it is, and then having a secondary cloud for whatever purpose. There's a variety of good reasons to have a second cloud, and we're all for it, right? At the end of the day, we want you as Microsoft to be successful, and so tools like Azure Arc that enable you to sort of unify your governance story or your control story to bring some of these either on-prem assets or even AWS assets under unified governance story. That's really powerful and really compelling for those who need to be multi-cloud.
Yeah, and I think especially the effort to go into every direction, because not every customer is going into cloud, into multiple clouds.
Right.
You have some customers that really have some workloads that have to stay on-prem.
Yep.
And right now it was, let's say the last 3 to 5 years, it was horrible to manage those things because you always had two setups. You had your monitoring on-prem, your monitoring in the cloud.
Right.
Some customers brought it together, but not everyone. And then especially when it came to managing your policies, your security stuff, it was
a
always
nightmare.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the things that we as Azure see as really one of the key differentiators for the platform is the ARM API and the ARM control plane. It's really unique in that every resource type, everything that you're doing in Azure runs through the same API, which is what enables you to have ARM templates for deploying anything as soon as a new resource is released. It enables you to write policies that govern your entire Azure estate. And so the ability to take any on-prem asset or any AWS asset and bring it into the Azure control plane is super compelling and super powerful. So we're really excited to see what people do with it.
Yeah, that's great.
What about security? I mean, that's something. If you have Azure Arc, are there any security controls in it as well?
Yeah, I mean, from the governance perspective, which is where my expertise and I think Laura's expertise is also, there are things that you are doing in governance that enable you to be secure, right? Security is a huge topic, and there's a lot to discuss there. But
Right.
from the governance perspective, it's about making sure the right resource types are being consumed, that you have whitelisted as an organization, or making sure that you're using the right SKUs and not spending too much money, or making sure that the right people have access to the right resources, which is a huge challenge. And so having your governance set up really enables you to be secure in the cloud.
So what you're saying is that security and governance should go together, should go
Hand in hand.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Absolutely, they should go hand in hand. And from a standpoint of how we look at building out our products, our governance team, our deployments team, our Azure security division, we are frankly only separated in the org chart because we can't have one person having 37 direct reports.
Right.
From a human perspective, that person would never be able to sleep.
True.
And so, from a standpoint of how we look at our approach, how we build out our products, if you look at the Azure Security Center service, if you look at all of the different policies and controls
Right.
that are inside of Azure Security Center, over the last year, they have taken all of their controls and they have replumbed them under the covers to rely on Azure policy. So we're all using the same backbone, the same framework, the same language.
Okay. And those same backbones monitor our own services, our own first-party services, right? So we really like it when first-party equals third-party. All the services that you see, all the new resource types that exist and are being announced this week are all governed by Azure policy. They all have subscriptions that roll up to management groups. They're all using Security Center to monitor everything. So it's not something that we're just sort of spewing out into the world. We use it every day, and that's where a lot of our learning actually comes from.
And it's always something I tell to my customers when they ask me, is it really a good thing and is Hyper-V capable of running big environments? I always say, have a look into Azure.
Right.
Absolutely.
It seems
It's
as
working
they
okay,
can.
yeah.
And is it really something, is Azure policy something we should use? And I was like, yeah, well, I think one of the biggest in the world, they are using it.
Totally.
And
Yep, absolutely.
It's quite a good thing.
In fact, as part of our internal service monitoring and how we run our services internally, there is a monthly meeting inside of Microsoft that I think many people have already heard of, called Fundamentals Day. We also call it Fun Day. It's not fun, depending on how your service did that month. But it's this ginormous room where all of our leadership comes in, all of our service owners come in. Scott Guthrie is sitting there. He may or may not be in a red polo shirt at the time. And if your service had an outage, if your service failed to meet its SLAs over the course of the month, you are expected to answer for why.
Yeah.
And if the answer, not necessarily, oh my God, you had an outage, you're going to get fired. It's the cloud. You're going to have outages. I mean, that's kind of the reality of.
Yeah, we're all humans.
Yeah, that's the reality of distributed systems. But the conversation that will happen is, if your outage was related to some sort of preventable configuration issue, the first question out of Scott's mouth is going to be, okay, do you have an Azure policy in place to prevent that from happening in the future? The correct answer to that question is yes. Otherwise, it's not a very fun day.
Yeah, I can imagine. One thing, Laura, when you are talking to customers, is it for them also that they have it in mind, that those topics like governance and security is related that far, or do you still see customers that don't get it right now and that they really have to be pushed towards you have to have governance in place, you have to think about it? Because I see quite often customers that are playing around, let's say it like this. What's your experience about this?
So the conversations that I typically have, a lot of it stems from this idea of security and governance. They do tend to be organizationally mixed. Like they tend to both roll up into the chief security officer organization. A lot of the conversations that Alex and I have is it's less about where governance and security lives. It's more about giving people a way to get started. I think a number of customers that we've talked to, they will find themselves in this place of we can't deploy a single VM until we get everything right.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's impossible. That is one way to go. But one thing that we like to work with our customers on is how can we get you started in the cloud? How can we get you to some sort of a minimum viable product in the cloud? And let's say that your security controls that you're ready to deploy in the cloud, maybe they're not ready for certain workloads yet. Maybe you haven't figured out your data protection story in the cloud yet.
Yeah.
You know what? That's okay. Don't put high priv data in the cloud today. get some stuff up in the cloud, start working with it, start getting your governance policy, your governance controls working, and then when you're ready to do the next thing,
then we can
go do
ahead.
the next thing.
The reality for us, at least from my perspective, is still that many customers have started with Azure, let's say 3-4 years ago, and governance didn't play a very big role back in the days.
Right.
So what would you recommend to these guys that are, let's say, in the
Still in the
middle
stage.
of
Yeah.
migrating workloads from on-prem to the cloud, and now figuring out that they missed to do Azure governance?
Yeah, frankly, that's usually the case, right?
Yeah.
It's rare that you have a net new greenfield
Right.
Azure estate that you get to plan governance for. It's usually, oh no,
It's
there's
the
something
best
going
case.
wrong, right? So what's really great about policy, about the governance services, about Security Center is you don't need to do the entire thing in one shot. You can roll out policy and advance your governance story over time, right? So what we recommend to customers when they're getting started with policy in a pre-existing Azure estate is use policy with audit mode on, right? You don't have to be denying requests as soon as you've enabled governance. Why don't you just see kind of what's out there and what people are doing? So with policy, you can just turn on this effect called audit, where we will monitor every request the same way we would if we were denying resources from being created, but we'll let those things through. You were letting it through 2 weeks ago. Why can't you keep letting it through today, right? But
Yeah.
start to understand what things look like and turn on more aggressive policy controls over time as you're communicating with people, right? One of the things that we've actually found is that policy governance is a great way to increase communication within an organization, right? Because all of a sudden, IT really needs to be talking to these application teams to say, hey, this is something that we're going to be preventing in the next few weeks, so you should start to pay attention to these sorts of things. And that communication opens up so many doors, right? That enables cohesion within an organization.
And it also brings application teams to think about their own stuff. So if you ask them, if we enable this policy, will this hit you? And they're like, whoa, never thought about this.
Oh no, Will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like if you think of the example of a lot of organizations, a big thing that they want is they want to have a single or at least some set of centralized corporate blessed key vaults for managing their shared secrets. And when you turn on policy, you'll go find out that all these different application teams have all gone and deployed their own key vaults.
Yeah.
99 times out of 100, they haven't done it to be malicious. They haven't done it to get around IT. The reason they've done it is you've got an application developer. His or her boss said, "Go figure out how to deploy shared secrets." He goes out onto the Azure documentation, and step 27 is deploy a key vault inside your Azure subscription.
And they are like, oh, that's easy, but they didn't consider and how it plays into the big game, right? Yeah.
And how do you see customers? Because I have sometimes still customers that are asking for approval workflows for running Azure resources, like you said in the beginning, Laura. The customer was known to, if I want a server, I have to request it. There's someone approving it. Then it's bought, it's shipped, and then we can work with it. And now we're in the Azure world, and we are agile and modern and innovative, but the processes inside of the company are still a bit like, oh no, you have to get the approval from your boss and approval from procurement and approval from whatever. So yeah, what do you see about this? Is this still a common thing, or?
So yes, that is something that we still get asked for. It's not a capability that we have in the platform today at the point of request. It is something that we're looking at working on in the future because we get a lot of requests around it. Yeah. We do have the capability to do kind of approval-based things in terms of remediations. Yeah. And so Alex had mentioned when you're deploying a policy when you're deploying governance into an environment that's already existing, and as he suggested, you first turn it on, you turn on that governance using audit mode so you can see the shape of what's out there. Yeah. The next step in that process is to do what we call remediations, which is where once you see what is out of compliance, you can then create tasks, you can create PowerShell scripts, you can create jobs to then bring those resources into compliance. And when you do that, and this is a capability that exists in the platform today, the remediation process is actually something that you, the customer, have control over when, where, and how it takes place. We actually explicitly won't remediate on your behalf, because we want you to have the ability to say, this has to happen within my change control window, or this has to have a ServiceNow ticket associated with it. And so that's something that's available for us
I would like to
today.
see what happens, at least. Yeah.
With governance, we like to use the phrase that we're trying to thread this needle of speed and control, right? You want to enable velocity in your organization, but you want some sort of set of guardrails or some ability to control what is happening. So you want to limit those approval workflows as much as possible, but the reality is you still need them in certain phases. What you don't want is you don't want central IT or whatever that central organization is to become the bottleneck for velocity, right? You want to be able to get those things through as fast as possible. So with Blueprints, what we were focused on was, okay, how can we enable these central teams to build out a library of architectures so that as soon as a request comes in, they can say, okay, I know what you want, I'll approve it, I will stand up the subscription in a way that I clearly understand and have already designed, implemented, verified, so that I can get you through those gates as fast as possible and enable as much velocity in the organization as possible.
Yeah, good point. Last year, same place, we discussed about Blueprints, I think for the first time in our podcast. Just give us a quick overview. What are Blueprints for them who's never heard about it?
Yeah, so Blueprints is this packaging construct. So you're creating these objects called blueprint definitions. They can be versioned, and you can add artifacts to the blueprint definition. So you can add ARM templates, you can add policy, you can add role assignments to the blueprint definition. And then once you have this package and you've tested it and you verified it, the idea is that you have this library of blueprints that you have created. And so as application teams are coming to you, these central teams saying, hey, I need to start up an application in Azure, I don't know what I need to do, you have a blueprint that's ready to go to set up those foundations in those organizations with all the policies, all the role-based access controls, resources like networking, log analytics, Key Vault, those foundational things that frankly, a lot of application teams viewed as a tax to getting into Azure, right? They just want to deploy their code into the cloud. They don't want to have to worry about policy and RBAC. They just want to get going. So Blueprints was a way to enable that sort of interaction.
Yeah, that's a good thing. So with the Blueprints, we see quite a big motion right now. And what you mentioned, you can put some deployments in there. So we're talking about ARM templates now. And I always say ARM templates, either you love them or you hate them.
That is still the case. That is still the case.
For you, it's still the case?
Yeah.
I love them. I recently did a LinkedIn learning course about resource manager templates.
Oh, nice.
So in German, for all our listeners over there in Germany. What is it about ARM templates? Can you explain what's the power of ARM templates in regards of Azure?
And how do they pay into Blueprints? I mean, what is the goal for them?
Yeah, so ARM templates are one of the foundational artifacts of a blueprint definition, and the idea is that you can deploy any infrastructure that you need in a blueprint. If you can get it into an ARM template, then it can be packaged into a blueprint. An ARM template is a document, it's a JSON document that describes resources that you want to create in Azure. It's really a thin layer over that ARM REST API that we were talking about earlier. And the power and the beauty of ARM templates is that because we're all operating in this ARM API and we're creating new resource types in the ARM API, as soon as that resource type exists, whether it's a private preview or a public preview or a GA service, it can be put in an ARM template. So understanding how ARM templates work is super powerful and super enabling for you as an organization.
What would be your starting point if someone is not yet into ARM templates, he's just playing around in the Azure portal? What would you suggest to get started with templates?
Great. I'm so glad you asked this question.
It was not prepared.
But it's obvious, though.
So we actually just redesigned our beginner tutorial for ARM templates. ARM templates have been this intimidating thing for a lot of people. They don't like JSON, they don't understand these details of the API, and they just like look at it and they run away.
They're not used to code.
Yeah, right. And so our new tutorials, you can go to aka.ms/justlearnarm because you just got to learn it.
Oh, that's great.
And it'll walk you through step by step, really slowly, through the ARM template kind of lifecycle. So the first thing you'll do is deploy an empty ARM template. It will deploy no resources, just so you can understand the end-to-end of actually doing the deployment. And then you'll slowly but surely, you'll add a resource, you'll add a parameter, you'll add a variable. And by the end of that tutorial, you really will have a good understanding of what's going on. So if you have people in your organization who've said, I'm never going to learn ARM templates, I hate them, I don't want to learn them, point them to that and, and let me know.
Like Alex.
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing that comes up when we talk about infrastructure as code are all the other frameworks like Terraform, Pulumi, whatever is out there right now, and it feels like spreading like flowers in the spring. What's your opinion? So I'm an ARM lover, to be honest.
Yep.
I see the benefits of Terraform, but I also have some struggles with Terraform sometimes because they don't even match the final capabilities we have. So what's your opinion on this?
Well, first of all, it is a great time to be an infrastructure developer. It is like so cool what is happening in the world right now of infrastructure development. So you've had ARM templates, which is this thin layer over the API. So it is the most powerful, but for many people it's one of the hardest to start to learn. And then you have Terraform and you have Pulumi. And Terraform is awesome because it really did lower the barrier to entry to becoming an infrastructure developer, right? So they crafted this really nice kind of developer workflow around deploying infrastructure, and that can be really enabling, where someone may not have wanted to learn ARM templates, they may be able to learn Terraform, right?
That's me.
And at the end of the day, we want you to be successful, right? We want you to be able to get to Azure and be happy when you're in Azure and successful. So whether it is ARM templates or Terraform or Pulumi or the CLI or the portal, like all those things are good. And I think it's great that there's so much competition and everyone's kind of trying to out-innovate each other, because at the end of the day, we all win at that point.
Okay, not bad.
Yeah, you were mentioning artifacts like roles when you earlier talked about what blueprints can be, and I was wondering how important do you see that RBAC is within security? I mean, in the total perspective of security in Azure. It's
so important, and Laura's a better expert on identity than I am, but it is like mission critical. You have to know who has access to what. You want to be limiting permissions as much as possible, and that can get away from you really quickly, right? So you really want to be thinking that process through of what is your process for granting RBAC, who has the ability to do that, and be really considerate with how you're thinking about that.
Yep, I remember, and this is completely dating myself, I've been with Microsoft for 10 years now, and in these super early days of Azure, in the super early days of O365, we had to go teach our service teams what RBAC meant. The number of tenant admins we had inside the Microsoft.com tenant because SharePoint Online, it was SharePoint Online at the time, hadn't yet implemented RBAC. I worked on the security team. It made us cry on a daily basis.
Didn't we used to only have 2 roles, and you just have like admin and reader, and that was all you had?
And oh my gosh, the number of, we had dozens if not hundreds of vendors who were admins on the Microsoft.com tenant because they needed to administer SharePoint Online.
That sounds like an easy environment.
we have fixed that. It's okay. But at the time, it was a kind of a hairy time to be alive.
Yeah. But maybe again, I mean, RBAC is still, I think, when customers reach out to us, they're like always, like I said, I mean, they want to have like a big workshop where you bring in an architect, and where you bring in a security guy, and when you bring in, let's say, one guy that is more focused on process and everything. And they, if we talk about RBAC, they say like, whoa, that's a level too high for us. What would you recommend customers like these to start, and how
what's a good starting point to get started with
RBAC?
Sure, absolutely. So I mean, the security person in me will always say that least privileged equals good. But then, much like we have that balance between speed and control, we also want to have that balance between complexity versus security versus complexity, security versus simplicity. As you mentioned, it used to be the case where there were 2 roles inside of Azure. There was reader and there was admin. And if you wanted anything in the middle, good luck. We now have any number of existing built-in roles. We have security admins. We have, we have like backup the equivalent of backup operators back in the on-prem Active Directory days. So I mean, my recommendation especially for someone who's having a lot of trepidation there, is start with the built-in roles, because they're a lot more fleshed out than maybe you thought they were if you were looking at them 2 years ago. And I would say that would be a really fantastic place to start before you get into the whole notion of, oh my gosh, how do I craft out these custom roles?
Yeah.
And that becomes a balancing conversation with your security teams.
So do you think with the built-in roles they will reach like around 60 or 80 or how much? I mean, what would, from your experience, what is the percentage of what companies can reach with the built-in roles, and how much needs to be custom configured, like for the enterprise?
I mean, to get started, I think you can get really broad coverage with the built-in roles, and again, that becomes a conversation with your security teams. Because a security person's favorite answer is no. Yeah. And, the security person is perhaps going to come with you with this super granular, this person can only have this specific access to this thing right there.
And only at this time.
Let's be a little reasonable here. Let's look at what you're asking for. Let's overlay it against the list of built-in roles. Let's see how close we can get before we start diving into custom roles.
Yes. And that's also something very important I try always to get to my customers. You have the RBAC on the one hand side, but to make sure that they are not going too far, you still have the policies, the governance rules in place, so that you can say, okay, he maybe gets the contributor rights. Like you said earlier, it's a tester, he just wants to play around, he just has to figure out, and he should get a contributor right. Yes, he can do nearly everything besides setting security rights. But we set the boundaries on the other side when it comes to policies, that he's not playing around with the $50,000 VMs.
Yep, right. Absolutely, and that's where you get into, there's a capability inside of Blueprints that I think is amazing, which is around resource locks, where if you craft this blueprint that has this really integral piece of shared infrastructure, maybe it's your corporate key vault, even if I hand you a subscription and make you an owner on that subscription, you still can't delete that thing. Right. Because it was configured at a higher level in the hierarchy than even a subscription owner can touch. Yeah, we had a bunch of customers. I was speaking to one last week that had this whole library of custom roles. It was like, they called it like owner minus and contributor minus because it was just like that one thing that they didn't want people to be able to do, but then they started using blueprints. They put the blueprint lock on those resources, and now they can go back to the built-in roles, and it's just one less thing that they have to manage.
And honestly, that's something that's why I ask that question, because at least our customers tend to over-engineer that whole RBAC thing. Yeah. That's why I was like, I think we can reach a level of, let's say, 80% with the built-in roles, and that's okay. And then you can build whatever you need to minor configure.
In general, the golden rule, I mean, I think in life, but especially in Azure, is like, don't do anything until you absolutely know you need to do it, right? Just use what we give you out of the box until you have a good reason to not use that thing. I mean, most enterprises will end up having some degree of custom roles, but the built-in roles really do cover you a lot. I think one of the things, if you are getting started in like the RBAC space, is understand what role definitions are and what they look like. Understand how we describe a role, literal one-line role in Azure, so you can understand how the whole permissioning model works. And the other thing is, like, set up a sandbox, play around. I mean, we're in this golden age of the ability to provision and create resources. So set up that sandbox environment, try things out, modify roles, use different built-ins, and get a feel for how these things will actually play out in an organization.
Agree. Yeah, and I think most companies would do good if they start with some basic rules, like not everybody needs to be an owner, because most people are just doing it because then it's easy, because everything will work, but that's not the best thing. Second thing I always advise is never use your Microsoft accounts anyhow. So the best thing to explain it, my kids are playing Xbox with my Microsoft account. Do you really want to have it in your Azure environment? So that's one of the things we've seen quite often. So just get rid of those basic mistakes, I would say. Get into with some standard rules, and then you will raise the bar of security already. And then for sure, if there's some very specific thing, especially when it comes, what I see quite often is then, as long as we are on dev, test, QA, it's more easy to manage security. When it comes to a production environment with customer data, especially when you're in certain markets, then you have specific requirements, and then you can totally lock down everything. And you would even do better if you have a full automated deployment pipeline and you don't need access to the portal anymore. I think there are some more ways to optimize, but in the starting phase, just don't do the basic mistakes, I would say.
Absolutely. And if you're one of those highly regulated customers who is in that other 20%, well then at that point there are other options, there are other tools, there are other services available for you. You start getting into, I don't remember, they may have rebranded it, but it used to be privileged identity management inside of Azure AD, where you can do check-in and check-out of admin credentials. So yes, I need to be an owner on this subscription for 5 minutes to go and do a thing. Great,
Yeah.
I check out an admin credential, and 5 minutes later, it expires, and I'm not an admin anymore.
Yeah, that's one of the important things. We all know, therefore you need a license. And I often hear discussions about, we need high security, but we don't want to pay those €5 or dollars per admin. And when I say, what the hell?
How many admins do you have?
Yeah. And when the answer is then 500, then you
You
run away.
Another world,
Another
yeah.
conversation.
Then you better run away. Okay, one more topic I'm interested in. I had such customers, no?
No, never.
Another topic that's interesting for me, and Laura, you mentioned it already earlier, Azure costs money, obviously.
It does.
we cannot change it. And one sentence I said last year in the podcast, and you were looking like, oh, he really said it. I said, in Azure, nobody cries for you. Because if you spend the money, you have to pay for it. If you deleted something and you didn't have a log, it's deleted and then you're screwed up. But last year you said, we care for. Azure Management team cares for the customers or cries for the customers. And now, what is it about the cost management thing? And I think there was a lot of movement over the last 12 months.
Absolutely. So at Azure Cost Management, we could spend an entire hour on Azure Cost Management. There are going to be a number of sessions on it during the week here at Ignite. They're all going to be live streamed afterwards, just like all of the other sessions. Kind of the best way to think about Azure Cost Management. Azure Cost Management as a service is it's native to the platform. It's built into Azure. If all you are doing is cost management of the Azure platform, Azure Cost Management is a free service. You get it for free by virtue of being an Azure customer. If you start doing cross-cloud budgeting, cross-cloud forecasting, for example, at that point there is a cost component. But if all you're doing is Azure, ACM, Azure Cost Management is a free service. Again, we could spend an entire hour on the different capabilities of it, but conceptually, the way that you think about Azure Cost Management, it makes an awful lot of sense if you've ever had a teenager on your cell phone plan. It allows you to set up budgets. It allows you to set up limits. It allows you to set up alerting thresholds of, you had budgeted 20 grand for Azure this month, and it's the 5th of the month, and you're on 19 grand. Maybe you might want to go and look at something. Maybe you want to go look at something about that.
You should look out. Yeah, that's right. With the cost management, there's also one thing, and I would like to hear your idea about this. I often had customers that did quarterly cost reviews of their normal on-premises environment, and they never changed their behavior when they got into the cloud. And then there are the big surprises after 3 months, or some maybe have changed it to monthly reviews. I always suggest to go, especially when you're starting something new, go into weekly reviews. And as we have it in the Azure portal, you could do it even on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
What's your recommendation about this?
So the way to think about it, obviously you can review as frequently as you would like to. The one sort of caveat that I would throw out there, just pragmatically, is especially if you are moving workloads from on-prem into the cloud, and maybe you have this big N-tier application where your migration process is going to take some amount of time, you do want to be aware of the fact that there's going to be a curve. So there's going to be a curve where your costs are going to increase as you are in this intermediary phase, and then once you get everything into the cloud, they are then going to normalize, and then the curve is going to then go down the other side. Kind of an interesting point for us, and something that we're thinking about as a product team. I've had customers who have asked, if we hit our budget limit, or if we hit whatever budget limit we've set, can Azure stop us from deploying resources? Like, can we put that hard limit? And I am a big fan of not doing that.
Yeah, please don't do it.
Please don't do that.
Don't break all my pipelines.
Please don't break all of my pipelines. And I mean, frankly, just from a business perspective, if you think about, I'm a manufacturer of ladies' handbags, and I do a reasonable amount of money every month. But then all of a sudden, some massive Instagram influencer snaps a photo of my handbag on their Instagram account. Well, overnight, the traffic to my site quadruples. The cost of running my site quadruples.
Yeah.
And if I have put a throttle on being able to scale up to meet that
You'll
demand,
stop selling.
those customers are gone, and
Yeah.
they're never coming back.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
No, I always have customers asking for, can we set a hard limit? What's happening then? I was like, no hard limits for certain reasons. One reason is like, would you really like Microsoft to interrupt your business? Is it their opportunity to do this? On the other hand side, would you like to do it on your own?
Technically, we could do it because all things are possible in code. But I will say, you don't want us to do that.
Yeah, I think so. So let's stay with. Please keep an eye out for your costs.
Absolutely.
Okay, there's one last question. Laura already knows it from last year, I think. For Alex, it's kind of a surprise.
So it's Alex first.
Yeah, Alex first, I think.
All right.
There's one question in our podcast that always comes at the end.
All right.
If you have a magic wish about Azure Management, governance, whatever, choose a topic around Azure. If you had a magic wish, what would it be?
A magic wish to improve the space or something like
Whatever.
that?
Choose.
It can be
a feature that gets
Yeah.
popped out of nowhere, or a thing that customers understand,
Yeah.
or whatever. Something. What do you wish for?
All customers deploy blueprints on ARM.
that would be
Now it's
nice.
up to you.
Nice.
And now it's a bit sad that we don't have a video podcast today.
yeah.
Because
See
if
my
you see
pondering
this-
face. Yeah.
There is the pondering phase, yes.
Let's see. So one thing that we're having a lot of conversations about, and something that I'm really interested in, we talked about the high barrier to entry to learning ARM templates and sort of how can we make that easier. One thing that I wish could happen tomorrow, but something that I hope happens in the future, is some evolution of the ARM language. So today it's all in JSON. It doesn't have to be JSON in the future. So it's something that I'm personally really excited about, but we're super, super early in the conversations of what that could possibly turn out to be. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it should just be JSON forever. But I think if we could have some sort of evolution in that space, it would go a really long way.
Okay, so let's
Nice.
dream out of it.
That's a nice one.
Laura, what about you?
If I could wave a magic wand, I would love to find a way to kind of bridge the gap between the server admins and the development teams, specifically around things like DevOps. I find that development teams, they understand pipelines, they understand Azure DevOps, they understand GitHub, they understand Jenkins. I want my server people to understand that as well.
Yeah.
Because especially with things like Blueprint and things like policy, you can package up your infrastructure and your policy requirements, and you can manage them the same way as code. And when you say that to a person who's been a server admin for the entirety of her career, you can't see me because it's not video, but I'm raising my hand right now, it can scare the bejesus out of you.
Absolutely.
And I would love to find a way to be able to make that topic more approachable to people who have been long-term on-prem server admins. I would know a line of code if it jumped up and bit me.
Okay.
Can
nice.
I add something
Nice
to
one.
this
Yeah, you
wish?
can. Yeah, for sure.
So I was having this conversation with someone yesterday, and they were saying we were teaching ARM templates and Terraform and Ansible yesterday, and someone was asking me, they were saying, it's great that I'm learning how to author this infrastructure as code, but what do I do with this? How do I operationalize this in my organization? I hear all these terms. DevOps is a loaded word now, right? It's like you don't know where someone's going to go if they say the word DevOps. And I think it's really good if we kind of like get away from the buzzwords for a bit. And my wish in that space would be like if everyone could just learn Git, not necessarily GitHub or repos or DevOps or whatever, just learn Git and like take some time to learn what that workflow is about. What does it mean to branch? What does it mean to commit? And then the world opens up for you, right? All of a sudden, DevOps is way easier if you understand what a commit actually is, right? One book I would recommend for people that are interested and haven't made this transition, it's called Git for Humans. It was written by.
Is that possible?
It was written by I forgot the name of the author, but it's.
I'll look it up.
It's this group of web designers and sort of web engineers and people in that space, and they had to write their HTML and their CSS and whatever other code, but they were having such a hard time teaching people Git. The way I learned Git was through this book. It's like plain English, really easy, and sort of lowers the barrier to entry for people in that space.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think the operationalization is that the
Sounds
word?
good. Sounds good.
is really one of the main topics that we will have in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
No matter if it's just security, security in general, if it's management in general, it's everywhere. And then to have the products and pieces in place is good. Is the first step. But you're not done that. And then what you're saying is, I totally agree on that.
Okay, as people hopefully hear this on Tuesday morning, any sessions to really watch out for?
I have sessions. I have a whole list here.
You have
He has the list.
Yeah, I think
He has
there
the
are
list.
so many thousands of
So many
sessions.
of them.
I got into the session planner on Saturday or Sunday, and I was really like scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And it's
What do I
multiple millions, it feels like.
I'm going to give you all the good ones.
Just give us the key ones, not everything.
So tomorrow there is a deep dive on
Which is today.
governance.
For the
Oh
listeners.
yeah, today.
Tuesday.
when you hear
Tuesday.
this.
Yes.
Where am I? Oh, here it is. BRK 3036. Deep dive into Azure policy and governance. That one's going to be really good.
Oh, yeah, that's a nice
Loaded with content. I like last week. Everyone was like, "Oh, could you just shave off 1 minute? I need to just include this one other thing." So there's like a ton of content, a ton of demos. It's going to be really good. And then my shameless plug for my own session is on Friday. This is what's new with ARM templates for your deployments, BRK 3233. There's some really exciting, interesting stuff that I cannot wait to tell people about. For people that have sort of looked at ARM templates and thought it was too hard, or it feels like there hasn't been a lot going on in that space for the past couple of years.
Just go there.
This is an inflection point, I think, for ARM templates and that whole ecosystem. So super excited for that.
I marked that in my own schedule.
You marked it?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's there.
Perfect.
I will be there.
Laura,
Nice.
you told us you're in the diversity track. What do you do there?
Yes, so there's a number of just really interesting, kind of non-traditional sessions. They're in the diversity and tech track this week. We have one of my colleagues actually, who is she's a former member of the U.S. Marine Corps.
Oh.
And she has since transitioned to working inside of Microsoft, and so she's going to talk all about what it is to be a service member, and then making that transition from career military into the world of tech, and just how that affected her as a person. My session on
Is that Ryan?
No, that's Ayasia.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it's Ayasia. And then on Thursday, I don't remember my own session code, which is a sin. But
no worries.
I am.
We'll look it
We
up.
will put it into the key.
Yes,
in the
but
notes.
I am. I'm delivering a session about how being a competitive dancer,
Okay.
which I am
nice.
outside of work.
Okay.
How being a
Nice.
competitive dancer has made me a better PM.
Nice.
nice one.
The name of my session is My Two Left Feet. You
Nice.
can't miss it.
Love it.
Oh, that's
It's gonna
That's
be
a good
great.
connect.
that's a great topic.
Yeah.
That's a great topic. Okay, I would say we're done. Thank you all. Thank you for listening. As you heard, we recorded this at Microsoft Ignite live in the expo area in the hub. It's super noisy around us, but no problems. Microsoft is giving away some Microsoft Surface earbuds to our listeners. If you want to enter, go to aka.ms/podcast sweepstakes before December 15th, and there you get a chance to win those super cool Microsoft Surface earbuds. aka.ms/podcast sweepstakes.
And we thank Microsoft for having us in the podcast studios and the possibility to record and
Absolutely.
spread the word.
And watch out, we have multiple more recordings this week, so every day we will see one podcast coming up. So, yeah, thank you both for being here.
Thank
it was
you
a
for having
pleasure.
us.
Thanks a lot.
And thanks
And
for listening. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.